the European panic over the United States switching off the satellites, ending military supplies to Ukraine, and the coming together of what's called the Coalition of the Willing. My understanding is that something like 20 countries are involved. It's a moving number because we've been told that Australia is amongst the European powers that are talking about doing something vis-a-vis Ukraine. Either way, we've got Britain involved as a European power. And so these countries, some of them are promising troops, boots on the ground. What there is also a general sort of consensus around is that what is euphemistically called defense spending will increase. And we've had the figure plucked out of a hat. 800 billion euros is the budget. And certainly the message from Donald Trump is pretty blunt, pretty clear. And that is, if you don't pay, we won't defend you. We also have talk of a following summit to put sort of the details in. That's going to be on March the 20th, 21st. And we're also getting from Europe and Ukraine this rather pathetic message: no negotiations without Ukraine, or no negotiations without Europe. So we do have Zelensky heading off to Saudi Arabia. We do have Trump heading off to Saudi Arabia. But the reality is that what's going on is negotiations between the United States and Russia, and Europe and Ukraine might be the subject of those negotiations, but they're certainly not considered equal partners. That what is in the offing is some sort of deal between the United States and Russia. Having said that, I don't think that we should fall for the line that peace is just about to break out, that it's all over bar the shouting and the extra push here and the extra shove there on the front line, because it takes two, doesn't it? So we've got a rough idea what Trump is offering. And that is to sort of carve up Ukraine. 20% goes to Russia. What do they get in return? That hasn't been dealt with. We've heard speculation, which I'm extremely skeptical of myself, of some attempt to cleave Russia away from China. If you were Putin, would you fall into the arms of Donald? I wouldn't. How much longer is Donald going to be around? Is America a reliable partner in this? And also, in that sense, if Russia doesn't do a deal, or the deal that Trump wants, we also have the big stick, and we have Trump talking about not only continuing the war, but upping the war. So what's going on at the moment, at least in my mind, is very confusing. I'm not clear. And I actually think that the situation is simply not clear because there's a whole number of different possibilities depending on what the various actors do. But just illustrating Europe's position, we had Kaja Kallas. She's the former Estonian Prime Minister. She's now the sort of number two in the European Union. She traveled all the way to Washington to see members of the administration, not least Rubio, and was rudely snubbed. Rubio said, well, I've got another appointment. And so she went all the way to Washington only to be turned down. She wasn't told that before she, traveled all the way over the Atlantic. So this is a deliberate snub by the Trump administration, basically saying to Europe, well, you can pay, but you ain't going to be consulted in any equal fashion. So what's in prospect? You could argue that what's in prospect is a European backed proxy war. But again, I think myself, I would be very skeptical on that, not least because of the argument between Macron and Starmer. So Starmer, his line appears to be that what we Europeans do is up our arms expenditure, and to please Donald over there in Washington, what we do is use this money to buy mainly American arms. And my impression is that Germany, but in particular, France is in despair over that what they want is, here's an opportunity to build up European arms industry. Here's a chance to actually stimulate industrial production in a stagnating Europe. And what we have is Keir Starmer wanting to appease Trump by buying mainly American arms. Now, it's quite possible, and I've heard this, and I'm not dismissing it by any stretch of the imagination. I take it seriously, that one of the ideas entertained by the Trump administration is, first of all, to get Europe to buy more arms from America. Who knows whether there will be a ceasefire or a deal with Russia? The two, remember, are different. So maybe they go just for a ceasefire. You freeze the front line, no more fighting. You have an armed standoff. Meanwhile, you have European troops stationed perhaps on the front line, perhaps in Ukraine, perhaps on the border of Ukraine. Nevertheless, a relatively large force of European soldiers locked in to this frozen conflict. Meanwhile, as has been pre-planned in Washington, the Trump administration gets on with its real target, which isn't the overthrow of the Putin FSB regime in Moscow, but actually triggering some sort of armed conflict with China over Formosa, over Taiwan. Maybe that war spreads. Either way, that's the only serious challenger to US hegemony. It's certainly not Putin. It's certainly not Russia. That is a distinct possibility. So that in terms of Europe, it's radically subordinated to the United States. And in effect, what it's doing is paying tribute to a United States which is determined to fight some sort of war with China. And just on the United States, there is talk, and I just think it's just misplaced myself, of the Donald Trump administration being isolationist, the Donald Trump administration not being interested in the rest of the world. I just think that that is untrue. In my view, what we have is the assertion of US hegemony, but in a different way compared with the post-1945 world. That seems to me to be a more realistic assessment of what is going on, as opposed to the United States is turning in on itself, as we saw with the US after World War One. I don't see that being rerun